So today I'm really excited to have Murray Legg join me in studio today. Murray, thank you very much for agreeing to come and chat to me about your life story, what makes you tick and who you are. So thank you for that.
Thanks so much for having me.
I want to go back to the very beginning. I think, just in knowing your story and where you are, very, very successful today, a pioneer in the Martech space. I think let's go back to the roots and how you got to where you are today. So tell me a little bit about your primary school career. I do want to touch on a bit of family and the inspirations that you probably drew from that, but let's start there.
Thank you. Very humble beginnings. My mom and dad, came from big families. My dad's one of 11, my mom's one of 5. So that came with its own kind of support system in itself. But 3 of us kids, and my dad's a mining engineer. So as a result, in the mining boom of the 80s and 90s, we moved around the country a lot, but we also stayed in some really small towns. Odendaalsrus, Stilfontein, Welkom. And I can't remember the exact numbers, but I think I had gone to sort of 15 schools, primary schools, before I went to kind of my actual primary school, which was in Klerksdorp. And that was great. It was a melting pot of kind of everybody who was up and coming and aspirational in the country at the time.
And did you find those primary schools with that old traditional community where they really cared for the children and you weren't just a number and they really did give you the attention that you needed to grow within that space?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you wouldn't think that this tiny little blip on the map in the middle of the country was going to amount to anything. But I mean, I guess we were chatting a bit earlier now about what comes out of Benoni, for South Africa. And sometimes you just get, this support structure, I think, of the parents and the schools and the dynamic that is very supportive of kids.
Do you think there was anything specific in your primary school days that gave you the tools to maybe be an entrepreneur and you knew I'm going to be successful one day?
I don't know if it was sort of a conscious effort. I think it was more like an experiment. So when I was 7, 8 years old, my granddad used to live in a cottage at the back of our house. And in the afternoons, I used to go and spend some time with him, and he used to teach me about woodwork. And a thing that people were using at the time was letter openers when we actually had a postal service that actually worked. And not that my 7-year-old friends were receiving letters in the post, but I decided, let me make some letter openers and sell them to my friends for $1 or $2. And that
started your first business in grade 1.
Yeah. So I guess it was just sort of experimentation. I don't think it was anything conscious, but I do remember kind of a moment in kind of beginning of high school. I used to see my dad reading the business section of the newspaper and looking through these long kind of numbers and columns on that one particular page, and then saying, just tell me what's happening over here, because that's the page that you tend to look at a lot.
Yeah.
And he said, no, this is where the stock market kind of results come out every day. So what you can do is you can look, here's mining companies, here's the banks, etc. And then you can look for these columns, and this is the price earnings ratio, and this means this thing, and this is the price of the shares. And that curiosity sort of became an interesting thing for me. And I said, well, can I buy some shares? What would stop me from doing that? So my love for equity and understanding businesses started then in high school when I bought my first shares. I think it was 13 or 14.
Okay. And obviously high school was in Johannesburg. So you moved from Klerksdorp, went to Kes in Johannesburg, a great boys' school. I'm sure the community there also, encourages entrepreneurial thinking and just being different and out the box. Anything in particular in your high school career that also took you to where you are today?
Yeah, Kes is a wonderful school. And I think if there's anything to take from it, it's just that close-knit moral support system that you get with all the other boys, as well as, you know, the teachers, the coaches, and everything around that ecosystem that supports it. And, you know, you have everyone wanting to aspire to reach, you know, whether it's the first team rugby or be, you know, top of the academic list. But it's not sort of a zero-sum game where if one person succeeds, it's at the expense of somebody else. Yeah. It's a positive sum game where there's almost like this upliftment of everybody to help everyone on their journey, whichever.
How were your academics at school?
Yeah, they were pretty good. I was top of the class. I think I was top of the class every term, the whole of high school except for one.
Oh, wow, okay. And sporting, what sport did you play at school?
Swimming and cricket in summer, and then you had to choose one, so it became swimming. And then in winter it was rugby and athletics.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. And then let's go forward a little bit. So you finished school, probably top of your class, so incredible results. You then go and study a PhD in biomedical engineering. I mean, very different to, you know, maybe where I know you are today, that you actually went through that. So tell me what led you to study that degree.
So, I mean, what happened at the end of school, I was lucky to get a bursary. And I think the best thing around that was that it gave me optionality. So my dad said, you can study whatever you want, wherever you want. I'll pay for you to study at Wits.
Okay.
If you want to go anywhere else, you can pick up the tab for the difference. And fortunately had this bursary that I got from school, and I got another one from the university because of the sort of hard work that went into the academics. And so I spent some time, came to have a look at UCT, looked at Wits, and then at Pretoria, what was interesting was their engineering faculty actually had a biomedical kind of slant to it. And one of the lecturers was working on an artificial liver using baboon cells. And I thought, this is cool because I can get to do engineering, but it crosses life sciences. So went into study at Tuck's aeronautical engineering, which, you know, aeronautics, you know, is the movement of air, but you could also extend that into the movement of blood or anything that happens around the body. But I knew from the first day in first year that I was going to also have to top up my revenue because I had the bursary, but I didn't know what happened in second year. So either I could continue to kind of get the academics, you know, renewed, but it kind of tapered off, but I had to do something for second year. So even in first year, I then started a small venture with my roommates at the time, getting maths and science lessons done, which became a small tutoring business.
Okay, wow. Okay, and then second year going into finishing that degree?
So I mean, the math side of it, you know, absolutely loved. And then the life sciences piece was fascinating. You know, the particular point where when you've done enough of the theory and you can kind of then analyze what happens in the body. The one particular problem that was really fascinating was if you had to optimize the blood flow out of your heart, so as it travels through the aorta, it kind of goes around a bend, and there's friction involved, and you know, blood is a weird sort of substance. It can't move too slowly, or it clots. It can't move too quickly, or it hemolyzes. And so what's the optimal design of this aorta? And you put all of your knowledge and know-how into the maths of it, and then you see what the actual result is. And the human heart is basically perfect.
And you did design Evolve.
Yeah, so that got me interested in that. So after studying, I went to work at a medical design company designing implants, and that's where sort of the work on the PhD got going. Which was to design a heart valve replacement for emerging market patients.
Wow. And then we look and we look at what your career then did, and it took a huge shift. And I want to understand why. Like from the medical side of things, you then went into banking. What made you make such a monumental shift in your career?
Yeah, it's, I guess, you know, when you start facing the music about the things that you're short on in life and that you realize you actually need for the long run. the maths part was fine, but the finance part was a big gaping hole in the curriculum. So what I started to realize was, I had these kind of early ideas of what your own business might look and feel like, but also in that space of, where some people might be doing an MBA, but when you're starting to get into that sort of executive decisioning part, you're having to bring together so much kind of insight around the commerciality and the financial sustainability and modeling of a business. And I realized that that's where I needed to invest. So I almost had to say, let's take a bit of a detour to go and explore, understand, and invest and learn for myself.
How old were you then?
So at that point, I was 26. 26. And then went to go and work at R&B. They have a stream called the Class of stream, which they bring non-financial people into the financial markets. And really it was, from the founders of R&B, they were like, we'll bring people in to look at the problems that we have in non-conventional ways. So that was a wonderful 5 years working at R&B, understanding now, what does it mean to be bankable, fundable? What is a good business versus a bad business?
And I think that's what we found as well, is that people are great entrepreneurs and they can run a great business and they maintain the culture and all of those good things and they know how to sell. But when it comes to finances, they know where. Yeah. And I think you have to have that kind of backing to be able to run a successful practice.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the nature of entrepreneurs, I guess, as I've come to learn more about them, you get sort of almost two types of people. You get the people that see the life that they want, and then you get the people who see the impediments on the way to the life that they want. Yeah. And you actually need a bit of a mix of the two to have a successful, sustainable business, because someone's just going to go break all the rules, and then someone has to come and think about it from a durability perspective.
Absolutely. So I wanted to talk about, did you always want to run your own business? Did you always think you would be a business owner and an entrepreneur?
I must be honest, Candice, I wasn't sure. I didn't know at the time. But what I did find was the thrill of your own venture, being able to decide what you thought the market wanted. And I guess also in a way appreciating, at least for myself, that there's a lot of unconventional thinking that happens. So I've got a lot of things wrong in life and a lot of ideas that haven't amounted to anything, but one or two of those where you kind of imagine where that puck is going to be and you position a product for what the market might want. That's pretty thrilling as to being able to pursue it yourself.
Can you talk about some of those aspects where things didn't go according to plan? Because I think a lot of people start a business and they think, okay, well, it has to just be successful, but that's not reality.
Yeah.
You bump your head a few times before something actually comes to fruition. And I think it's just that resilience and, making sure that you don't give up ultimately is a strong character that, an entrepreneur needs to be able to build a successful business.
Yeah. You can absolutely try and will it into being yourself, and you can do all of the hard yards and all of the work to put it into play. But a lot of the time you are at the mercy of the market, and sometimes it's either what the market doesn't want, or there's a million other reasons why it might not work out. So I think luckily quite early on I learned that your identity is not your work. It's very closely ingrained, but I think where a lot of joy, happiness, and success is measured, I think a lot of entrepreneurs kind of hold themselves to a very high pressure level of account to say that my business is a success, therefore I'm a success. And if I didn't succeed, I'm not a success. I think that's something that is a big challenge for entrepreneurs. And then also what's pretty interesting is the ones that luck out first time often maybe don't do their second one, but their second one could be a bigger success. Yeah. And sometimes it plays out that if your first one doesn't work out, that's actually the best thing, because that teaches you the lessons, teaches you the humility, and then your second one often is a success.
I'm reading that book, The Psychology of Money, at the moment, and it talks very much around luck. and where people have made it on the first attempt and are hugely successful. But it all comes down to luck at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So obviously 6 years or 5 years at RMB, you then left there. Where to next?
So there were two things. One of them, which relates to the psychology of money, is how, there's a lot of people, and I was one of those, where you're working at corporate and you think, what can I do to start my own thing? Yeah. Do I need to start it in the background as a bit of a side hustle? Do I need to save up some money? What can I do to best prepare myself before I jump off the cliff and try and build the airplane as I'm descending? And the psychology of money is one of the top 10 books to read as a budding entrepreneur looking to venture out. So it's sort of the best growth hack to read other people's experiences, amongst others being, 0 to 1, the innovators, the founders' dilemmas. There's some great books kind of in that space. But for me, so I left with two ventures. So I'd raised some funding for the heart valve at the time. And that was to take it through the patent application filing process and then to prep it for animal trials.
And who helped you through that process? Or did you just know? Did you do a lot of research or were you like, okay, I need to patent this thing? Or did you partner with someone to help you through that journey?
Yeah, and I think very important, is to find a partner that can help you. So fortunately, being at the bank, there were enough people that I could chat to. It was an untested industry really in South Africa. So it was funding from the IDC, but definitely had a lot of guidance and input on that. In subsequent ventures, have also partnered with professional outfits, actually with more when we looked to raise capital for the media tech business called Webfluential. And, just in terms of, it's not just the ability to put money into your bank account, it's the ability to tell the story in an innovative way, package and display the financials, and then generate that narrative amongst a network that is established, that is a network that you just don't have yourself.
It's almost an art to that. And if you don't know, you don't know. So I always find partnering with someone who understands that and can play, it's almost like, playing a game.
Yeah.
You need to not show all your cards in the first meeting and then, make sure that you grow that relationship as you progress.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was one of the ventures, was raising funds and patenting the valve, and then what was the other one?
Yeah, so that was going to be largely an academic process with a lot of risk associated to it.
Yeah.
So to mitigate that risk, partnered with a very creative, very entrepreneurial, very good friend of mine, Mike Sharman, and we started Retroviral, which at the time was the first digital creative agency or PR agency. We had to introduce, creative agency was a thing, but we kind of went with the PR angle, and that sort of opened our eyes to a lot of fun that we could have with brands in that online space. So early clients were Nando's, Rockomamas, etc. So that was a great venture. And
did you enjoy that space? Because very different to medical, banking.
Yeah, it was, and it was such it was like the antithesis of a lot of the life that I'd been experiencing. So it was really cool to have that kind of creative fun, meet a whole bunch of new people in the space. But yeah, for a lot of the time, I was sort of the guy in the background, kind of getting all of the creative mess into some kind of a structure.
Okay.
And that's where we partnered really well.
I think that's what I wanted to ask. Like, what were your strengths and what did you bring to the table? Because it's not, you didn't go do an accounting degree, and, CAs generally are very structured and they have order and, those sorts of things. What was the strength? And I think you alluded to it now, is just bringing some structure to a growing business.
Yeah, it was. And I think, in the creative space, you can kind of run a mile creatively, and often, no one really pays you for that. So a lot of the times, we really kind of think about, like, is this really where we're going to allocate our time and our capital and our energy? But I think that, the thing that sort of was interesting there that I got exposed to was where you want to put a framework in place for whatever it is that you want to do. So in in having a framework, it allows you to deliver according to almost a recipe. And what we try to do there was put a framework around what do we do for clients, even though the creative output looks very different. What is that repeatable process that, you know, staff then could attach themselves to? There was a process involved. And where I see that playing out now is sort of a framework for leadership. And, you know, in so many of the meeting rooms, you don't have to have your executive team there to kind of lead you. Yeah. But what stays behind in the room after they've put that in place is that framework. And, you know, whatever the process is that you follow, it allows you to kind of have that on a frequent basis.
I think what we've seen is that if you have a common goal and you're able to communicate that goal really, really well to a team, everyone then can jump on board and they run with it. And I think that's what you're mentioning here. So with this new startup, how quickly did it grow? Maybe talk about numbers there, people, the culture of that business. I mean, those are all important aspects of making sure that you run a successful business.
Yeah. And I mean, it's an interesting one when you start thinking about your metrics for success. And often you ask, you know, in your business, like, what's your revenue? What's your EBITDA? How many people do you employ? And then the more that you socialize those, the more that those become the metrics for success, even though you might have lost your way in terms of thinking about, well, I got to actually take my kids to school today, or I was free on a weekend to go and travel, or I didn't have to be around for this one thing because the team covered it for me. So, you know, there's those metrics, but we grew, and I think the early stage, we almost were looking for the recognition. So it was important for us to win awards. So the Prism Awards, the Cannes Lion Awards, that sort of metric was defining for a young agency to say, we can play with the big guys. Yeah. And that's what we targeted first, and did incredibly well on that front. And then we were sort of invited to join the bigger table, and with bigger clients. So that was our kind of growth hack, effectively, to get there.
And any stress points in that growth phase? Because I think as a newly startup, it's bringing on the right people, the right management team, that you can allow them to, you know, bring their visions to the table. I think that's an important thing. So bringing in the right people to maintain that culture and what you're trying to build. But then obviously as the years progress, I think those key metrics do change. Yes, you're always going to look at revenue and what your EBITDA is. I mean, that's almost like a non-negotiable. But then you start focusing on other things within the business, you know, people's mental well-being, the culture, the different dynamics within the different teams. Maybe just talk through that.
Yeah, so challenges for us were, we were a young company with very limited cash flow, and as a result, who we could hire had to be fairly junior. Okay. So, you know, we couldn't kind of get creative directors from Ogilvy, you know, and kind of access their network and credibility. We had to build from the ground up. And
that takes a lot of time on your guys' side to just ensure training, learning, development, and uplifting that team.
Yeah, absolutely. So the trade-off there was our time kind of invested into them in exchange for the cash that we couldn't pay for the experience. So we knew that, but the consequence, and this is also where I see a lot of young companies often like really struggling, is the cash flow dynamic of their business. So managing your debtors book sounds like the most boring thing on the planet, but that became a key focus for me. I mean, not an FD, but understanding what we committed to, when we were incurring our costs, and when the client was paying us, and managing that story so that we had the cash to pay the salaries, we had the free cash to grow and bring on new staff. And you know, for a supplier, often you get shunted to the back of the queue. We'll pay you on 120 days, but you've incurred all the cost up front, and you pay the price of growth for that in a massive way.
I think managing cash flow, specifically in a business that is now in its growth phase, is probably one of the trickiest things that businessmen don't understand.
Yeah.
And I think if you get a handle on that really early, you can then manage it and you can grow without the stress and anxiety of not having cash in the bank.
Totally. Yeah. And you mentioned, revenue and EBITDA, but, watching the bank account every day.
That's the most stress.
It became a very real stress. And also a very real success, when it did work out. So that's, I'd say that those were success factors.
Amazing. So going into business with a friend, I think there are pros and cons to that. Obviously, that trust relationship was there from the start. So you knew that you had someone who had your back. Were there any other aspects with that relationship that you knew that going into business with this guy, we could make this a success?
Yeah, Mike and I knew each other from probably 6 or 7 years old. And as much as we kind of subconsciously knew each other, I think when you're in business together, it really brings to the surface all of the dynamics of good, bad, what needs to be spoken about. And I think the best thing that made the success was the transparency, that we could talk about literally anything, and that we had kind of daily check-ins, whether we were gymming together before work or catching up, at the end of the day. That was an important part. So of course, along the way, subsequently, I've had some worse experiences with friends or partners where you learn about the person and the details that's beyond the superficial in the times of stress. So yeah, there's some stat that says 99% of businesses die by suicide and 1% by murder.
Yeah, exactly.
And normally it's from that, the dynamics that happen either with the cash flow, with the founders, with the product, sales cycle, those, their own goals effectively that result in failure.
So throughout your journey, I think it's always important to have some sort of mentor. Did you find a mentor maybe early on in your career, or do you have a mentor? How important is it for you to have that sort of discussion with someone?
I think the most sort of consistent mentor has been my dad.
Okay.
And not for the specifics that he brings, but the ethics that he does. And, the ethics are things that you can apply in many different ways to many different things. So he's a great guiding light for me. And then when I think I've needed the detail, I'm very lucky to have a very strong network of friends who are also cyclists. And it's interesting, out of a group of cyclists, you wouldn't think that there's, champions of industry amongst them, but they really are. And it's almost that life that exists outside the office that's been so good for me, for my mental health, my fitness, my enjoyment of life, that has been cycling.
Let's maybe talk about that, because you're quite an extreme athlete. Tell me about, when did you get into cycling? Because obviously, doing swimming and cricket at school, you had to transition into cycling somewhere. And we know we part of a cycling community. It is an incredible environment to be part of. But talk about the cycling. I know you've done a few full Ironmans. I mean, that's a whole nother level of training. So extreme athletes, tell me how you fit that into your busy schedule.
So I guess university was the first access to cycling. So my uncle, when I was in high school, he said, come and do an Argus with me. So that was great. He helped me build a bike, and we came and rode the Argus. So that was sort of the first
Can you remember
notch.
Your time?
I think it was 3:20, which actually wasn't too bad in hindsight.
Oh my gosh, on your first Argus, you make me sick. Yeah.
But then university was kind of cycling to class. I did a few Arguses with my dad.
Okay.
And then it sort of tailed off a little bit. And actually, when I was at RMB, one of my friends there said, you know what, if we want to get close to the executive, they all go mountain biking.
Okay.
So you buy this mountain bike, I'm buying this mountain bike, we're going to go train, and then we're going to invite ourselves on one of their training rides.
Did you do any mountain bike races?
Yeah, so we went and did Sani to Sea and Wines to Wales, which was great. So that was sort of the early bug. Then triathlons. Yeah, I did a few halves. I did one full in PE, which was a bit of a
challenge, a mental challenge, eh?
Yeah,
apparently, if you can run a business, you can go do a half Ironman, apparently, or a full Ironman.
There's probably a strong correlation, but with people that enjoy suffering and work as well as on the bike or on the road.
100%.
Yeah. And then, so we got married. Nicole and I got married about 10 years ago this year. And we, with kids, time then just became a different priority in terms of their life. So there wasn't the luxury of, swim, cycle and run, every other morning and night.
Yeah.
So then kind of sharpened it just into the part that I loved, which was cycling, and joined a great group in Johannesburg.
Don't you find in Joburg, it's always flat and fast, and you can do a cycle and do like 100 Ks and in 3 hours or whatever the case is. And then you've recently moved to Cape Town and you just can't get around any mountain and you've done like 60 Ks in that 3 hours.
Totally.
It's crazy.
Yeah. My body's definitely felt like it's going through a little bit of a biological change to manage the hills that are down here.
Absolutely. Yeah. You obviously just need an e-bike or something.
I think a few more years before that. But
do you do any activities in that with your wife? Is she sporty?
She is. She loves running. So yeah, we spend a lot of time. We did actually a lot of triathlon training and races together. She allocates a lot more time to the kids. Sacrificed a lot of her physical kind of time training. And yeah, recently we enjoying running again, which is wonderful. Yeah, if you sweat together, you stay together.
Apparently.
So they say. Yeah.
And obviously managing, a wife, 2 young kids, trying to run a business. I mean, how do you manage it all?
She probably manages me more than I do. But yeah, I guess it is. There's always some cost that you're having to pay. And I guess as you get on in life, you start being aware of what balance means for you. I think a lot of conversation goes towards having a work-life balance, but I actually don't agree that that's a thing. I think if you want to win in one part of your life, you have to allocate as much resource to that as possible and have the best support team in your family and your friends to help you get there. So the time that you take to make a success of one thing always comes at the cost of the other. So, so for sure, there's always juggling to be done and expectations to manage.
I think with you building the business to where you have now, you're able to then allow people to run a business, and you can then take some time when it is school holidays or being able to go watch rugby or ballet or whatever it is, and take that time away from the business. And I think that is so awesome when you do have your own business, to be able to step aside and spend a bit of quality time with the family.
Yeah, absolutely. And your definition of wealth, the psychology of money kind of comes into it, is what would you like to look back on? When you look back on the photos of your kids when you're little, like, do you have that feeling of like, I love that because I was there, or I missed that because I wasn't there? And you start shaping that balance for yourself. And I mean, the hard part about your own business is that I don't think you can ever take an official day of leave, because there's always something to check, or an email or a call or something to manage. So you are literally always on call. But, the baby that you bring into the world is then, you get to the point where it's default not dead. And there is a great team that can run the business and can grow it. And then you can start supporting your team to realize their goals. So you realized yours in bringing a business to fruition, and then theirs with their aspirations become kind of your next chapter of support. And you mentioned mentorship. So, being accessible to help people as they're facing similar challenges, I think is quite fulfilling.
What do you enjoy most about running a business?
So the business that we're in now, my career sounds like it's a bit all over the show, but if there's a strategy that I had to say that I've applied to it, it's to look at the intersection of industries as as innovation kind of happens. And so after the creative agency, I started Webfluential, which really is like an Airbnb where you have hosts and guests. Webfluential has creators, influencers, and celebrities, and has brands. And we help the matching of those, those personalities, and then the content production of content to bring in the stories of how these brands are part of people's lives and then become stories for purpose. But the secret source of opportunity that I saw at the time was effectively the Moneyball idea or concept, where you took maths into a space that maths was not really prevalent, in that case, baseball. And we took maths into marketing and said, let's understand the maths of the people and how they produce content and how their audience engages with them. And we can come up with a bit of a formula to give us a competitive advantage. So it was really that kind of intersection. And I think, the world that we're in today has so many opportunities in this space of intersections of all sorts of things. I mean, life sciences now and gene editing is an incredible opportunity where AI is helping you, edit genes to, cure diseases in young children before they're even born. There's so much to do. I think it's a ripe opportunity for the one-man and the two-man businesses now to flourish.
How do you see AI impacting your business?
Sure, it's an interesting one in that we have so much business in the way of creators and creative, and AI is in that space. So AI can now make 8-second videos with a small prompt that literally look real and lifelike. They can help with creative ideas. If you ask it, Claude or ChatGPT, help me with a creative response to this story that I want to say. So I think as a efficiency tool and a creative tool, it's really unlocking so much for at least our universe. But then it's also democratizing access to the world's knowledge. So it's so exciting to know that every child at school now will have effectively the best tutor in the world to help them get through whatever it is that they can't understand and explain it to them in a way that's accessible to them.
You know what I find so strange though? So my kids said that if they use ChatGPT, they'll get like almost fined, or like there's a red list. And I mean, people are using it in business. So why not encourage that at schools? Because it's something where, if I know my daughter maybe wants to go into some sort of medical field, and if there's something on like gene pooling, and like let her experience that now. It's crazy. Yeah.
And I think, there's defensibility from a lot of industries where they feel threatened by it. Education is absolutely one. I mean, if you look at everyone from Ivy League universities through to schools, there is a lot of threat there, because now why would you want to pay, premium for going to some overseas university when you can have exactly that experience? So, you want
the human touch though, hey?
Yeah.
And you want to experience and walk into an Oxford or a Harvard and just experience being there.
Yeah. So I think everyone feels threatened by it, whether it's, in your day-to-day job, in your experience of the world. Everyone naturally feels threatened by it. And I don't think it's a case of feeling threatened by it. I think the best thing to do is embrace it and try it out and use it. And then when you use it, you realize I can actually unlock a little bit of value for myself. So in the same way that the pandemic brought on delivery of goods from Woolies and Checkers, it's time that you get back in your day, that you don't have to drive to, stand through, queue for groceries. You can just go on your app, get them delivered. And that time, that innovation that arrived allowed you for extra value in your life because you can allocate your time differently.
I love that thinking. Yeah.
So I think AI is the same.
So if there was something you would do differently in your life, is there anything? Have you always taken a step back and been like, oh, I should have done maybe that differently? Or
I guess the feedback from the crowd that you get is, you tend to hear the parts of you and what you do in terms of like where you see friction. So where did you introduce friction into your company, your relationships, the people around you? And that feedback loop is very valuable. So I was very lucky to have a very strong IQ, but I think where I came up short was on the EQ. Okay. And if there was somewhere, if I could go back, I'd want to kind of double click onto that a lot more and be a lot more aware of what was happening. And I think that would have kind of steered me, not necessarily differently, but just made me aware of a lot more things where often I was just stubborn and wanted to get something done in a particular way. Maybe there was a different way sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I don't think it's led you in any poor light. I think you've achieved incredible success in your short life. I do want to touch on, like, what is your next big race event? What are you doing? What's coming up?
Yeah, thanks, Candice. So now living in the Cape, Wines to Wales is just around the corner. Okay. So together with a few friends, we'll be doing that. Last year I did Epic. So I'm kind of taking a little bit of a break from too much. I kind of went deep into the negative on my pink slips. Okay. But yeah, hopefully now I can explore the Cape with gravel racing and mountain biking. Okay.
You did happen to appear on a cover of a magazine once. So the modeling career, where did that come in?
I have no idea. Yeah, so that's the GQ magazine, and that was a good 10 years ago. So I can't remember what it was. Yeah, but my aunt gives me such hell. So we went on holiday to Italy when I was in high school, and I said I want to go to Diesel. Yeah. And I guess I just had an interest in kind of brands from early on, and I guess you feel a particular way and you enjoy experiencing them a particular way. So I guess it was just a side quest of mine was to
love it. I had to throw it in there. Yeah. So I think if there was one aspect that you could teach your kids, because I always say to my children, like, just be a good human. You can have all the success and all the money and all of those good things. But if you could instill one element or give one guiding light to your children, what would it be?
Sure. So there's that discussion about Nelson Mandela, actually. And he early on said to his dad, how do you become a leader? Mm-hmm. And he said, I don't know how to become a leader, but you can come to the group that I speak to every weekend and you can figure it out for yourself. So he went along with his dad, and the lesson that he learned was the community spoke and he spoke last. Wow. And I think we all live in a world that's so fast-paced, and we all so... like our identity is so wrapped up in us wanting to express ourselves that we often don't make time to hear what everybody else's opinion is. Mm-hmm. So it's not to step away from their own identity and their own beliefs, but I would say if there was a piece of advice, I'd say listen first and speak last.
Love that. So I think on that note, Murray, it's been incredible having the conversation with you. Thank you for coming to chat to me today. And I wish you all the best. Good luck for Wines to Wales. Hope it's a good cycle and hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful.